Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage the honorary chair of the Southern Republican Leadership Conference and the governor of the great state of Oklahoma, Mary Fallin.
Well, wasn't that a great discussion between Lieutenant Governor Lamb and Larry Nichols with Devon Energy? I hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was very informative, and I appreciate all that certainly Lieutenant Governor Lamb does for the state of Oklahoma. He's been a great lieutenant governor for me, and appreciate Larry Nichols and Devon Energy and all the things that Devon does for the state of Oklahoma. So thank you, gentlemen, both for providing such great insight into energy in America. And of course, the theme for this year's conference, for the Southern Republican Leadership Conference, is Energizing America. And we certainly want to energize America. And we know that Devon Energy has certainly been energizing Oklahoma and helping energize the power of America. So to Devon, we appreciate all that you do, and certainly providing energy, whether it is fossil fuel, oil, gas, wind power, all forms of energy are very important to our nation. And Devon has been a global leader in providing that energy, whether it is helping to develop new innovative technology that is used in horizontal drilling or fracking, is helping to provide businesses and American families the power that they need to fuel their homes and their businesses, and certainly to help us fuel our economy. So to Devon, we appreciate all that you're doing in the state of Oklahoma. And of course, having a discussion at this conference about North American energy independence is critical, not only for our economic security, but for our national security. Thank you, I appreciate that. And as you just heard, with the latest and new technology that we have in our nation, we are becoming a world power when it comes to developing American-made energy. And ladies and gentlemen, that is something I feel very strongly about as an American, is that I'd rather spend American money buying American energy than sending our money over to foreign hostile countries to buy energy and power. It's a matter of national security and certainly economic security. You know, people in Washington, D.C. talk a lot about government stimulus and economic stimulus. But the truth is that developing our own natural resources right here in America, which we have an abundance of, is certainly an economic stimulus. We know a little bit about creating jobs in Oklahoma with the energy sector, as well as do other states. And we know the revenue that it generates back into our economy. And we also know that it is better to create those jobs and opportunity and generate the revenue than it is to get a federal handout as an economic stimulus. We can create that revenue right here in America and right here in our states. But what we need is a conservative leader on the national level in the White House that supports American-made energy. And we need one that is forward-thinking about American-made energy and that won't be held hostage, frankly, to the radical left that, in my opinion, is anti-fossil fuel, while they get into their gasoline-powered cars, their commercial jet flights to go over wherever, their private jets powered by jet fuel, or whether they heat their homes or their businesses with coal or natural gas or whatever type of fossil fuel it may be that they're powering their businesses or homes with. That is why it is important that we have someone in the United States White House that understands the importance of the contributions that the energy sector makes to powering our economy and keeping our nation safe, not to mention our military and our national defense. So, our next speaker today is someone that I know very well, happens to be our neighbor to the south. We call it Baja, Oklahoma, but I think he would argue with me about that. Our great neighbor from the south down in Texas. He's been a wonderful leader, a great friend. He's been active in so many different organizations, from leading the Republican Governors Association. And believe me, this gentleman understands the importance of energy in our nation. As a former governor of Texas, you can believe that Rick Perry knows the importance of having an energy policy for our nation. He understands the importance of the energy sector when it comes to creating jobs and revenue, and when it comes to national security. And he understands also how bad public policy and how the overreach of the federal government, especially with some of our federal regulatory agencies, can stifle economic growth and opportunity and can affect our important energy sectors in our nation. And so we are so glad today to have him join us. Governor Perry has devoted a good portion of his life to public service. He understands how to create jobs. He understands how to create prosperity and opportunities for Americans. He has been the 47th governor of Texas, the longest serving governor in the Lone Star State, which we appreciate his long service. He's certainly been a champion of conservative policies, and he's helped Texas become, I hate to admit it, but to become America's great economic engine. But we're chasing you, Governor. We're chasing you in Oklahoma. And we're catching you in some areas, but we're very proud of that. In 2010, Texas had created almost 1/3 of America's jobs. Think about that. 1/3 of America's jobs came out of Texas, and new jobs in the private sector. And without the jobs that Texas had created back during the 2007-2008, when we went through all the national downturn, there could have been a net negative loss of more than 200,000 jobs. And so we were very fortunate that Governor Perry focused on prosperity and job creation and creating a friendly business climate. In addition to all of his work on creating a strong, powerful economic engine in Texas, Governor Perry also understands and has been at the front and center of doing everything that he can to help us on an issue that's very important to Americans, and that is border security. In fact, I can still remember, Governor Perry, you and I having a conversation about this a couple of years ago when we had the illegal immigrant children who were coming across our border, and what a great concern that was for our national security. Governor Perry doesn't mind telling the federal government in Washington, stop it, enforce the laws, secure our border. And we appreciate that about him. He's a fifth-generation Texan. He's a veteran of the United States Air Force. He's a graduate of Texas A&M University. We've got some Texas fans here. And he's married to his childhood sweetheart, Anita. They have 2 children and 2 beautiful granddaughters. Let's give a big Oklahoma welcome to our Texas governor, former Governor Rick Perry.
Appreciate you, you know that.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Governor Fallon. If you were ever curious about whether or not Republican leadership matters, you don't have to look any further than Oklahoma. Governor Fallon has done a fabulous job of governing this state. I will tell you, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, I'd wake up every morning, I'd look east, and I'd look north. Because I knew for a fact that Mary Fallon and Bobby Jindal were over there trying to figure out a way to make their states more competitive, to come across the border and try to lure a few businesses over to their side of the border. So anyway, and that's the type of competition we really need in this country. So anyway, it's good to be here with you. What I call ground zero in the energy revolution that's transforming our country and making our country more secure because of the energy patriots that reside in Oklahoma. I think it's been some 4 months now since I left the governorship. I gave up my day job, so I have been free to roam around the country. And I've been having a memorable time. I mean, just going across this country from coast to coast. And, you know, and I found that despite all of the little pessimism, if you will, that's underneath all of this, some hard years that this country's been through, Americans have not lost hope.
Now, I will just say they've lost faith in their leaders in Washington, D.C. They know we can do better, that we can do better than 0.2% growth. They know that we can do better than 1 in 10 American workers either out of work, underemployed, or just flat giving up on finding a job at all. They know that we can do better than 1 in 5 of our children that are living in a home that is getting food stamps. And they know we can do better than 1 in 7 Americans living in poverty. See, Americans see this chaos in the Middle East. They see a president who has demonstrated weakness instead of resolve. This president who's vacillated when we needed to stand strong. A few days ago, we learned from news reports that ISIS, that black ISIS flag, was flying over the city of Ramadi. That's a strategic city in that Anbar province where there were extraordinary young Americans who gave everything, sacrificed their lives. Ramadi was the place where the Sunni awakening occurred, where Sunni leaders banded together and stopped the insurgency, working with the Americans. And years later, on the heels of that surge, we had won the war in Iraq. But our current president has lost the peace. And now we have ISIS rolling across that part of the country in American vehicles with American weapons, taking areas that we had secured with the treasure of American blood. And of course, they achieved their foothold in Syria. They crossed a red line when there was one drawn on the ground with no consequences, I might add. They were contributing to the entire instability of the Middle East. Now we see the Islamic Republic of Iran that's negotiating a nuclear deal with our president, a deal that, as it currently stands, doesn't limit the nuclear ambition of Iran. It actually legitimizes it. I'm here to tell you that this season of chaos doesn't have to last. We don't have to accept the weakness abroad that we're seeing today. We don't have to accept the slow recovery economically that we see here at home. We have the power to make our country new again, to assert American values abroad again, to rebuild our job base at home again. There is nothing wrong in America that a change of leadership will not fix. When you think about it, I kind of feel like it's 1979 again. And 10 years after Jimmy Carter and that Iranian hostage situation, we rebuilt our economy. We strengthened our military. We saw the Berlin Wall fall and Soviet communism defeated because we had a president that understood when America's strong, the world is safer. And we can do this again. So the fact is, what we see today, we don't have to live with, because we know that in 2016, if we elect a Republican president, we're going to have better days in front of us in this country. Now, let me just say, we shouldn't nominate just any Republican candidate. Let me tell you a few of the qualities that I think that individual might need to have. After 2 terms of a president who has little executive experience, who is long on rhetoric but pretty short on a record of achievement, I don't believe the American people are going to simply trust the rhetoric. It's going to be a show me, don't tell me election where voters look past the rhetoric, look at the record. Leadership's not a speech on the Senate floor. It's a record of action. It's not what you say, it's what you do. It's not going to be good enough in 2016 just to say the right things. You must have a record that demonstrates that you know how to do the right things and that you've done the right things. Executive experience matters. A record of signing balanced budgets, creating jobs, overseeing military forces. All of that matters. The stakes are too high for leadership that's unproven. America has entered a time of testing, and we need a president who confronts these stark realities, provides leadership that transcends the petty partisanship that we've seen in the last few years. We need a president who bridges the partisan divide rather than widen, who brings people together instead of separating us by class and by race or by creed. We need a president who tells the American people the truth. Things like, when America is stronger, the world is safer. There are two kinds of thinking in the world today from my perspective. We got this delusional thinking of the left. It's kind of epitomized by our president. You know what I'm talking about. Where criminals will obey our gun laws. That kind of thinking that says when state sponsors of terrorism, they're going to put down their arms to obey a nuclear agreement. You know, where radical groups like ISIS are really not religious in nature. Now, the rest of us, we subscribe to what I recall reality-based thinking, where radical nations should not be appeased, they need to be opposed, where the best defense against crime is an armed citizen. That's the kind of thinking we need in this country. You bet. It's time for us to have a president who admits what the American people already know. We face a global struggle against radical Islamic terrorists, and we are in the early stages of this struggle. The great lesson of history for us is that strength and resolve bring peace and order, and weakness and vacillation invite chaos and conflict. If I were the President of the United States today, I would send a very strong message. I would restore our strong relationship with Israel and insist that it has the right to exist as a Jewish state. I'd rescind any agreement with Iran that legitimizes their nuclear ambitions. I would offer missile defense to our allies in Europe, like Poland. And I would flood Asia and Europe with United States liquefied natural gas to send a powerful message to Mr. Vladimir Putin. We need to send him a message. Mr. Putin, if you're going to use energy as a weapon, the United States is going to deploy the largest arsenal. And people need to understand something, that homeland security begins with border security. We have the right to secure our border. Last summer, I looked the President in the eye and I said, Mr. President, if you will not secure the border, Texas will. And that's when I deployed the Texas National Guard to the border to take on the drug cartels, those transnational gangs, the ones that are shipping across the weapons, the drugs, the people. And I might add, I had a helper, an individual, Mary shared with you. We had the conversation 2 years ago, or last summer actually. And she said, Governor, if you need Oklahoma's help, we will be there. Thank you, Mary Fallon, for that. We deployed our law enforcement. We deployed our parks and wildlife wardens literally in the river. We deployed our National Guard as a force multiplier. And you knew what the result was going to be. I knew what the result was going to be. We had a 74% decrease in apprehensions in that region of the border because we were securing that border. It's time for Washington to do their job and secure our border. Amen. Thank you. So, to rebuild our military, to reassert America's influence abroad, to deploy our resources that are needed to secure our border, we know what we need to do. We need to restore the American economy. It's time to revive the economy, to bring back jobs from overseas, to stop the overregulation of our small businesses, to bring prosperity to Main Street, not just Wall Street. And we can start with our tax code. We have the highest corporate tax rate in the Western world. It's time to lower that. See, corporate tax reform and investment in this country, we can have the most extraordinary renaissance of manufacturing in this country that we've ever seen before. And I might add, we need more than just corporate tax reform. We need to simplify the tax code and reduce the tax burden on individual taxpayers. We need to stop this excessive regulation that comes out of Washington that kills jobs, that harms small businesses, that costs every American family almost $15,000 every year. We need to repeal every perverse incentive that keeps people from getting full-time work. You know, one of the many flaws of Obamacare is that it causes employers to move people from full-time to part-time work because of this massive penalty that you have to pay on the insurance side of it. That must be repealed. So clearly, the next president needs to look at all the regulations. And if it's a job killer, repeal it, period. We also need a president who recognizes American energy is vital to the future of this country, both economically and from our national security. Our energy policy relies upon a president who respects it, who supports it. And our current president, he says, I support American energy. He just doesn't support the drilling for it, the transporting of it, or the exporting of it. His energy policies doesn't amount to anything more than they're going to study it, they're going to delay it, and then he vetoes something to pander to a political base. That's his energy policy. We ought to be expediting the LNG permits anywhere in this world, particularly to Asia and Europe. We need to be working to make America energy independent. We can do this. We also need to, I grew up about 250 miles south of here, in a little place called Haskell County. And I was on a small bank board. And it paints my worldview about things like Dodd-Frank banking regulations. And we need to confront the reality of these banking regulations. The fact is, it didn't end too big to fail. It just codified it in the law. American people see this rigged game that's being played out there where insiders get rich and middle class gets to pay for it. There's something wrong when the Dow Jones is near record levels and a small business can't even get a loan because of the regulatory climate. There's something inherently wrong with that. The perspective of that leads me to ask this question. Since when did capitalism involve the elimination of risk for our biggest banks while regulations strangle our community banks? Capitalism is not corporatism. It is not a guarantee. Capitalism is not a guarantee of reward without risk. It's not about Wall Street at the expense of Main Street. We need to return hope and opportunity to our Main Street citizens if we're going to revive this American dream again. And I know it can be done. I'm as optimistic about the future of this country as I've ever been. I know this can be done, and I know it can be done because I've seen it done in my home state over the last 14 years. In the last 7 years, my home state created 1.5 million jobs, while the rest of the country collectively lost 400,000 jobs. We prioritized education. In 2003, we were 27th in the nation in high school graduation rates. Last year, we were second highest graduation rates in America. And did I mention we did that without Common Core? Let me make something abundantly clear. Let me tell you why I oppose Common Core. And your common sense will tell you that this is correct. I trust Mary Fallon and the legislature in Oklahoma and the citizens of this state, the teachers and the school administrators working together to come up with the curriculum for your children rather than some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. We had 14 years of balanced budgets in my home state. Largest tax cut in the history of the state of Texas happened under my watch. The formula for our success was really pretty simple. You keep the taxes as low as you can while delivering the services that the people want. You have a regulatory climate that is fair and predictable. A legal system that doesn't allow for oversuing and those accountable public school policies. Then get out of the way and let the private sector do what the private sector best, which is create jobs and create wealth and create an economy where people know they can risk their capital. We can do this, folks. We can do this again for this country. I tell people we're an extraordinary country. We are a resilient country. You think about who we are, where we've come from. We've gone through a civil war. We've gone through 2 world wars. We've gone through a Great Depression. We made it through Jimmy Carter. We will make it through the Obama years. Trust me on this. We'll do this. We just need leadership in the White House again. You know, there was a former Texas governor, Sam Houston, who had a little bit to say about leadership. He said, do right and risk the consequences. I've always pursued that righteous path. No political matter got in my way from making the right decision. And I've faced my fair share of leadership challenges. Nobody came and handed me a manual and said, here's how you deal with tens of thousands of people that are going to cross your border, getting out of the way of a hurricane. When that governor called me and said, hey, listen, we need to send 25,000 people to your state, I said, send them. There wasn't anybody that gave me a manual that said, here's how you deal with Ebola. It's going to show up in your state first. Nobody gave me the how-to book to deal with 70,000 children on our border last summer. That's what executive leadership is all about. That's what America, I think, is hungry for. Someone that's been tested. Someone that you know what they're going to do. And we've been tested in the state of Texas. We've been tested by hurricanes Katrina and Rita and Ike. We've been tested by the space shuttle falling out of the sky. We've been tested by Ebola. We've been tested by that border crisis. You see, a lot of candidates will say the right things. Whether it's about the border, whether it's about taxes, whether it's about spending, but we need a president who has done the right thing, is going to do the right thing. That's the leadership we're looking for in this country. There is nothing wrong in America today that can't be fixed with new leadership in this country. I know that. We are just a few good decisions away and a leadership change at the top of the best days in front of this country. There is no shortage of courage among the American people. There's only a shortage of leadership in Washington, D.C. This is up to us. This is in our control. And I think this is our time of testing in this country. This is our great challenge, if you will. I was raised on a dryland cotton farm by a great patriot. 15 years ago, I took him back to his old air base in England, and we visited this place where was probably as vibrant as he had ever been as a 19-year-old boy, flying 35 missions across Nazi-held Germany. We walked down the old sidewalks. We walked down the runway where he had taken off. Then we flew across the English Channel together to go to that cemetery above Omaha Beach for those 6th of June ceremony to celebrate the start of the liberation of that entire continent. My dad and I standing there looking at those thousands of white crosses and stars of David. You know, interestingly, they all face west. West across that ocean back to the country they loved. The country that they had sacrificed their lives for. To an America they would never return home to. And it struck me that every one of those headstones is standing there in silent judgment of us today, asking that question of whether their sacrifice was worth it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to give them that answer. I want to give them that answer in November of 2016 when we elect a patriotic American Republican President of the United States and we put this country back on track to be the absolute greatest country in the world. The best days are ahead for us, my friends. Let's make this happen. God bless you. God bless America. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.